Chapter 1. The Prisoner's Fear. The cold, sterile walls of the human base echoed with the low hum of alien machinery. Zara, a warrior of the Zelran Empire, sat chained in the corner of her cell. She had fought countless battles across star systems, her name spoken with a mixture of fear and respect among the ranks of her people. Yet now, here she was, shackled, a prisoner of the very species she had been taught to despise. Her violet skin, once a radiant symbol of her noble bloodline, was bruised and battered from the recent struggle that had ended in her capture. She had expected death swift and honorable, as was the custom among her people. Instead, the humans had captured her alive, a rare prize from their latest victory against the Zelran fleet. The moment she had been brought aboard their ship, her mind raced with all the stories she had heard. Humans were brutal creatures, known for their primitive methods of interrogation, their unrelenting thirst for conquest, and their unpredictable emotions. Zara's silver hair, now matted with sweat, clung to her forehead as she awaited her fate. Her golden eyes, though dulled from exhaustion, flickered with a lingering spark of defiance. She would not beg for mercy. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear. She had led countless soldiers into battle, watched friends and allies fall, and had never once bowed to the enemy. If she was to die here, she would die with her head held high. The door to her cell slid open with a sharp hiss, and Zara's heart rate quickened. Heavy footsteps echoed through the dimly lit room, each one causing her pulse to spike with anticipation. She could feel her muscles tense involuntarily, every instinct screaming at her to prepare for the inevitable pain. Her people had been at war with the humans for years now, and she knew their methods well. There were no diplomatic pleasantries, no civil exchanges between captor and captive. She braced herself for whatever sadistic treatment was to come. A tall figure entered the room. His uniform bore the insignia of a high-ranking officer, and his broad frame cast a long shadow across the floor. He moved with a confidence that only humans seemed to possess, an odd blend of arrogance and self-assuredness. Zara's gaze traveled upward, locking onto his face. His eyes were dark, but they weren't the cold, cruel eyes she had expected. They studied her with something almost curious. "I'm Lieutenant Ethan Grayson," he introduced himself, his voice steady and calm. Zara flinched internally but showed no outward sign of reaction. The name meant nothing to her. He was just another human, another faceless soldier in a war that had claimed so many lives on both sides. "You're Zara, aren't you?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Commander of the Zelran fleet that attacked our outpost on Astra 4? Zara remained silent, glaring at him through narrowed eyes. She wasn't about to give this man the satisfaction of a response. The less he knew about her, the better. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she waited for him to proceed. Grayson sighed, stepping further into the room. He knelt down so that he was at eye level with her, his expression softening in a way that caught her off guard. "I'm not here to hurt you, Zara," he said quietly. "I'm here to talk." Talk? Zara's mind raced. What kind of game was this? Humans didn't talk to their enemies. They interrogated, tortured, extracted information through whatever means necessary. She had seen the aftermath of human interrogations: broken minds, shattered wills. This was just another tactic. She was sure of it. "You expect me to believe that?" she spat, her voice hoarse from hours of silence. "You humans don't talk. You kill. You destroy." Grayson's expression remained neutral, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes. "Regret, perhaps? I won't deny that we've done terrible things in this war," he admitted. "But it goes both ways, doesn't it? Your people aren't innocent either." Zara bristled at the accusation, but she couldn't argue. The Zelran Empire had expanded through conquest, just as the humans had. They were both guilty of atrocities, both locked in a cycle of violence that seemed unending. But she wasn't about to admit that to him. "I'm not here to justify what we've done," Grayson continued, his tone gentle but firm. "I'm here to offer you a way out." Zara's eyes narrowed. "A way out? You think I'll betray my people? Is that what this is?" Grayson shook his head. "No, I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I'm asking for your cooperation." Her laugh was sharp and bitter. "Cooperation? You're delusional if you think I'll help you, human." Grayson leaned back slightly, giving her space but keeping his gaze locked on hers. "You don't have to decide now," he said quietly. But I want you to understand something. I'm not your enemy, Zara. The war may have put us on opposite sides, but I'm not here to torture you or break you. Zara scoffed, her chest tightening with mistrust. You expect me to believe you're any different from the rest of your kind? Grayson didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small vial. Inside, a shimmering liquid swirled, catching the light. Zara tensed, wondering what new form of poison or drug the humans had developed. But Grayson's next words shattered her assumptions. This is a healing serum, he said, holding the vial up for her to see. It will help with your injuries. You've been through a lot, and I'm offering you a chance to recover. Zara blinked, her mind reeling. This was a trick. It had to be. Humans didn't offer kindness to their enemies. They were brutal, ruthless. She had seen their soldiers in battle, had watched them tear through Zelran forces with cold efficiency. But here, in this small, sterile room, this human was offering her what? Mercy? She stared at the vial, her instincts warring with her logic. She was a warrior, trained to resist even the most tempting offers from her captors. But her body ached, her wounds burned, and she couldn't deny that the serum would be a relief. Grayson seemed to sense her hesitation. You don't have to trust me, he said softly, but I'm not going to force you. The choice is yours. For a long moment, Zara remained silent, her mind spinning with possibilities. Was this a trap? A way to weaken her defenses before the real interrogation began? Or was there something more to this human, something different? Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you doing this? Grayson met her gaze, his expression unreadable. Because I believe there's another way. For both of us. Zara's breath caught in her throat, her confusion deepening. Another way? What did that mean? Before she could ask, Grayson stood up and placed the vial on a small table beside her. I'll leave you to think about it, he said, his tone calm and steady. If you want to use the serum, it's here. I'll be back tomorrow. Without another word, he turned and left the room, the door sliding shut behind him with a soft hiss. Zara stared at the vial, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She had expected torture, pain, humiliation. But instead, this Lieutenant Grayson, had offered her something she had never anticipated. A choice. Chapter 2. The Fragile Truce. Zara spent the rest of the night staring at the shimmering vial, her mind torn between suspicion and curiosity. She had expected her first night as a human prisoner to be filled with pain and fear, not with this strange sense of confusion. Lieutenant Grayson's words echoed in her mind, but she could not shake the belief that this was some sort of tricky psychological game designed to weaken her resolve. But as the hours passed, the searing pain in her body became harder to ignore. Her wounds, sustained during the brutal battle that had led to her capture, throbbed relentlessly. The cold metal floor beneath her did nothing to ease her discomfort. Eventually, her warrior instincts gave way to pragmatism. If the humans wanted her alive, they wouldn't poison her at least. Not yet. With trembling hands, she reached for the vial. The liquid inside swirled like liquid starlight, glowing faintly in the dim light of her cell. Taking a deep breath, Zara pressed the vial to her lips and drank. The effect was almost instantaneous. A warmth spread through her body, soothing her aching muscles and dulling the sharp pain of her injuries. Her breathing steadied, and for the first time since her capture, she felt a sense of relief. Still, she couldn't let her guard down. Whatever game the humans were playing, she had to be ready for it. The next morning, as promised, Lieutenant Grayson returned. This time, he wasn't alone. A small medical drone hovered by his side, scanning Zara's vital signs as he approached her cell. She remained seated on the floor, her golden eyes tracking his every movement, but she felt less vulnerable now that the pain had subsided. Grayson studied her for a moment, noticing the empty vial on the table beside her. I see you decided to use the serum, he said calmly. Zara narrowed her eyes, still wary. It was either that or die in this cell. Don't mistake it for trust. Grayson nodded, as if he expected her answer. I understand. I won't ask you to trust me, not yet, but I think we can help each other. Zara's jaw tightened. What do you want from me, human? You keep speaking of cooperation, But you've given me no reason to believe anything you say. Grayson crossed his arms, his gaze steady but not unkind. I want information. Not about your military strategy or your fleet's movements. I don't care about that right now. I want to understand your people, the Zelran Empire, your culture, your values. Why are we even fighting this war? Zara blinked in surprise. Of all the questions she had expected, this wasn't one of them. Humans usually sought tactical advantages, military secrets, weaknesses in their enemies' defenses. But this man, he seemed genuinely interested in understanding her people. It was disarming. And why would I tell you that? She challenged. You think a few kind words and a vial of serum will make me betray my people's beliefs? Grayson smiled faintly. I'm not asking you to betray anything. I just want to know how we got here, how two intelligent species ended up in a war that neither side seems to fully understand. Maybe if we can figure that out, we can stop more bloodshed. Zara hesitated. His words carried a strange sincerity, one she hadn't encountered in humans before. Could it be that he truly wanted to understand? She had always believed that the humans were a savage, warlike race, incapable of empathy or compassion. But Grayson's demeanor was challenging that perception. Why should I care about stopping the war? She asked, her voice cold. Your kind has killed countless Zelran warriors, invaded our territories, destroyed our cities. What makes you think I'll help you? Grayson's gaze hardened slightly. I'm not asking you to forget the past. We've both lost too many lives for that. But I'm asking you to think about the future. How many more people on both sides have to die before we realize there's another way? Zara's heart clenched. His words stirred something deep within her, something she had tried to bury beneath layers of hatred and rage. She had lost friends, comrades, good people who had died in this senseless conflict. And yet, she had also seen the futility of it all, the endless cycle of destruction that left no real victors. I will never betray my people, she said quietly, but there was a hint of doubt in her voice. Grayson nodded, as if acknowledging her internal struggle. I'm not asking you to, but maybe there's a way to stop more people from suffering. Think about it. With that, he turned to leave, the medical drone following him out of the cell. Zara watched him go, her mind reeling. For the first time in a long time, she found herself questioning everything she had believed about humans. Could it be that they weren't as different as she had been taught? Chapter 3. The Unexpected Bond. The cold, sterile air of the human base had long lost its sharpness, and Zara was beginning to settle into the monotony of her imprisonment. Every day followed the same routine. The brief, emotionless delivery of food rations, an hour of exercise to maintain her muscle strength, and the occasional medical checkup by human drones. Her body had mostly healed, but her spirit remained restless. The weight of her captivity still pressed heavily on her shoulders, and yet, there was something different. Lieutenant Ethan Grayson. He had been visiting her every day for the last 2 weeks. His presence had become a constant, an odd solace in the bleakness of her confinement. At first, she dismissed him, assuming his kindness was a ruse to extract information. But as time passed, Grayson's behavior confused her. He didn't push for military secrets, didn't demand tactical insights. Instead, he asked her about her people, her culture, her beliefs, and slowly, almost against her will, Zara found herself opening up. It started small. She offered brief answers to his questions, nothing personal, just facts that any soldier might know about the Zelran Empire. But Grayson's persistence was gentle, his curiosity genuine, and over time, Zara realized that she was sharing more than she had intended. She told him about Irithia, her homeworld, with its majestic crystalline cities and silver oceans. She spoke of her childhood, growing up in a society where duty and honor were paramount, where every citizen knew their place in the grand structure of the empire. It was almost therapeutic to speak of these things she hadn't thought about in years. Grayson listened intently, always respectful, always thoughtful in his responses. He shared stories about Earth, about its chaotic beauty, its history of conflict and unity. Zara had never thought of humans as complex beings. To her, they had always been the aggressors, a violent species driven by greed and expansion. But Grayson's stories painted a different picture, one of diversity, struggle, and resilience. One evening, after a particularly long conversation, Grayson leaned back in his chair and looked at her with an expression Zara couldn't quite decipher. "You know," he began, "I've been thinking about this war a lot. And the more we talk, the more I wonder. Why are we even fighting?" Zara tensed. The question felt like a trap. Wars were fought for reasons strategic, economic, ideological. But Grayson wasn't talking about the tactical aspects of the conflict. He was questioning its very existence. "Because your people encroach on our territory," Zara replied, her voice steady, but her gaze wary. "Because the Zelran Empire must defend its sovereignty. What else is there to understand?" Grayson shook his head, a small, almost sad smile playing on his lips. "That's what they tell us. But it's never that simple, is it? We're all just following orders, fighting for causes we may not fully believe in. Do you ever wonder if there's another way?" Zara's heart clenched. She had never questioned the war, never doubted the righteousness of her people's cause. But Grayson's words stirred something deep inside her, an unease she had long buried. The Zelran Empire had always justified its conquests as necessary for survival, for the expansion of their civilization. But as she sat there, listening to Grayson's quiet musings, Zara couldn't help but wonder if he was right. Was there another way? Could they have avoided all this bloodshed? "I don't know," she admitted, her voice softer than she intended. "We've been at war for so long. I don't know if I can imagine anything else." Grayson's gaze softened, and for a moment, the distance between them seemed to shrink. "Neither can I," he said quietly, "but I'd like to try." Zara blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. "What do you mean?" "I mean, talking like this, understanding each other, it's a start, isn't it?" Grayson gestured between them. "We're supposed to be enemies, but here we are, having a conversation, learning about each other's worlds. Maybe that's what we need more of. Maybe if more people on both sides talked like this, things would be different." Zara's mind raced. Could it really be that simple? She had spent her entire life fighting for the Empire, believing that humans were the enemy. And yet here she was, sitting across from one, talking about peace. It felt surreal. "And you think we can stop the war by talking?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. Grayson chuckled softly. "I'm not that naive. But we have to start somewhere, right? I don't expect us to solve everything overnight. But maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to stop more people from dying." Zara wanted to argue, to tell him that it wasn't that easy. But deep down, she knew that he was right. The war had claimed so many lives, on both sides. And for what? Territory? Resources? The reasons felt hollow now, compared to the humans sitting across from her. For the first time since her capture, Zara allowed herself to wonder what it would be like if the war ended. If the Zelran Empire and humanity could coexist, could share knowledge and resources instead of tearing each other apart. It was a dangerous thought, one that could get her labeled a traitor if anyone knew she was entertaining it. But in the quiet of the interrogation room, with Grayson's steady presence beside her, the thought didn't seem so impossible. The next day, Grayson arrived with something different. Instead of his usual questions or casual conversation, he brought a small Object-A holographic device, similar to the ones the Zelran used. He placed it on the table between them and activated it. The device projected a swirling image of a nebula, vibrant and colorful, slowly rotating in the air. Zara stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. The nebula was familiar too familiar. "That's Irithia," she whispered, unable to tear her eyes away from the hologram. Grayson nodded. "I thought you might like to see it. It's not the best image, our scanners aren't as advanced as yours, but I figured it's better than nothing." Zara's heart pounded in her chest. She hadn't seen an image of her homeworld since she had been captured. The sight of it, even in this imperfect hologram, brought a flood of emotions she hadn't anticipated. Homesickness, pride, sadness, it all crashed over her at once, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. "I thought you hated us," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Grayson looked at her, his expression soft. "I don't hate you, Zara. I don't hate your people. I hate the war, the fighting. But I don't hate you." Zara's breath hitched. No one had ever spoken to her like this, not even among her own people. She had always been a warrior, a commander, someone to be respected and feared. But Grayson didn't see her that way. He saw her as, what? An equal? A friend? I don't understand you, she admitted, her voice trembling. You're not like the others. Why are you doing this? Why do you care? Grayson's gaze didn't waver. Because I believe there's another way. And because I think you do too. Zara felt a lump form in her throat. She had been taught to see humans as enemies, as aggressors who would stop at nothing to destroy her people. But Grayson was challenging everything she had ever believed. He wasn't just a soldier. He was something more, something she couldn't quite define. Before she could stop herself, Zara reached out and placed her hand over his. The contact sent a jolt through her, but she didn't pull away. Grayson's hand was warm, steady, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Zara felt a sense of connection. I don't know if I can trust you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Grayson's fingers curled gently around hers, his touch reassuring. I understand, but maybe we can start with this. A small step, a truce between us. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. A truce. It was such a simple word, but it carried so much weight. Could she really trust this human? Could she believe that he wanted peace, that he wasn't just playing some long con to get information out of her? But as she looked into his eyes, saw the sincerity there, the hope, Zara realized that she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that there could be another way, that they could find a path to peace. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. A truce. Grayson smiled softly, his hand still resting on hers. It was a small moment, but it felt monumental. For the first time, Zara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope. Hope for peace. Hope for something more. Chapter 4. The Breaking Point. The tenuous peace that had formed between Zara and Grayson hung by a thread as the war outside continued to rage. Every day, reports of new battles, new losses, filtered into the human base. Though Zara was kept isolated from most information, she could feel the tension in the air. Soldiers moved with a heavier step, their faces tight with worry. Even Grayson, despite his calm demeanor, had started arriving later to their meetings, his expression more worn, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. It was clear to both of them that the war wasn't slowing down. If anything, it was escalating. The Zelran Empire was pushing harder, and the humans were retaliating with equal force. The galaxy seemed to be on the edge of a catastrophe, and Zara could feel the weight of it pressing down on her every time she spoke with Grayson. Their conversations had grown deeper, more personal, but the looming conflict was always there, just beneath the surface. Both of them knew that their fragile bond couldn't last forever, not with the war tearing everything apart. One evening, Grayson arrived later than usual, his face pale and his movements stiff. Zara immediately noticed something was wrong. She had grown accustomed to reading his expressions, and tonight, he looked more troubled than she had ever seen him. What happened? She asked, her voice soft but edged with concern. Grayson hesitated, sitting down across from her. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. There's been an attack, he said quietly. A big one. Your fleet hit one of our outposts near the Zalros system. Zara felt her heart clench. The Zelran had been planning an offensive, but she hadn't realized it was already underway. She had heard rumors, whispers from the guards outside her cell, but she hadn't known the extent of the Empire's plans. Now, seeing the pain in Grayson's eyes, the weight of the situation hit her full force. How bad? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Grayson's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Thousands dead. Civilians, too. We didn't expect them to target an outpost that wasn't primarily military. Zara's stomach twisted. She had known that the Zelran were ruthless in their military strategy, but she hadn't anticipated an attack like this one that would deliberately target civilians. She had fought to protect her people, to defend their sovereignty, but this was different. This was slaughter. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the tragedy hanging heavy between them. I didn't know, Zara whispered, her voice barely audible. I swear, I didn't know. Grayson looked at her, his expression hard to read. There was anger in his eyes, but also something else hurt, disappointment, perhaps. I believe you, he said quietly, but it doesn't change the fact that this is happening. And now, our people are planning to strike back. Harder. Zara felt a cold chill run down her spine. She had been raised to believe in the righteousness of the Zelran cause, But now, in the face of this endless cycle of violence, she was beginning to doubt everything. The war had consumed them all, humans and Zelran alike. And she was caught in the middle of it, powerless to stop the destruction. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the question. Grayson leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "There's something coming. A major offensive. I've heard whispers from command they're planning to hit one of your homeworld's colonies. It's going to be bad, Zara. They want revenge for what happened at Zalros." Zara's breath caught in her throat. "Which colony?" Grayson hesitated for a moment before answering. "Ari, this. It's close to your capital." Zara's heart sank. Ari, this was a peaceful colony, mostly agricultural, home to civilians, farmers, and their families. It wasn't a military target. If the humans attacked it, thousands of innocent Zelran would die. And she knew, deep down, that the Empire would retaliate with even greater force, turning this war into a cataclysm that neither side could survive. "We can't let this happen," she said, her voice rising with urgency. "If your people strike Ari, the Empire will retaliate. It'll never end. You know that." Grayson nodded grimly. "I know. That's why I'm telling you this. We need to stop it, Zara, before it's too late." Zara's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She had always believed in the honor of her people, in the righteousness of their cause. But now, faced with the prospect of total annihilation, she realized that honor meant nothing if there was no one left to defend it. The war had to end. But how? "How do we stop it?" she asked, her voice laced with desperation. "What can we do?" Grayson's expression was grave. "There's only one way. We have to get a message to your leaders, to my leaders. Tell them what's coming. Make them see that this isn't the way." Zara's stomach churned. Getting a message to the Zelran High Command was nearly impossible from a human base. Even if she could somehow reach them, there was no guarantee they would listen. And the humans, how could she convince their leaders to hold back? "I'm a prisoner," she said bitterly. "They won't listen to me. They'll think I've been compromised, that I'm working with you." Grayson leaned closer, his eyes intense. "They might listen if we do it together. If we show them that this war doesn't have to end in destruction. But we have to act fast. There's not much time before the offensive begins." Zara stared at him, her mind racing. This was madness. She was a Zelran officer, sworn to defend her people, and here she was, contemplating an alliance with a human to stop a war that had been raging for years. It went against everything she had been taught, everything she had believed. And yet, she knew it was the only way. "I don't know if it will work," she said, her voice heavy with doubt. "But we have to try." Grayson nodded, his expression resolute. "We will. We'll figure out a way." For the next few hours, they sat together, formulating a plan. Grayson would use his access to the base's communication systems to send an encrypted message to both human and Zelran military leaders. The message would be a plea for peace, an urgent warning of the impending destruction. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. As they worked, Zara found herself relying on Grayson more and more. He was calm, focused, and determined in a way that reassured her. For the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't alone in this fight. They were partners now, united by a shared goal, to stop the war before it consumed them all. But as the night wore on, a deep sense of dread settled over Zara. She knew that even if they succeeded, there would be consequences. The Zelran High Command would never forgive her for working with a human. She would be branded a traitor, exiled, or worse. And Grayson, she didn't know what would happen to him, but it wouldn't be good. As they finished crafting the message, Zara looked at him, her heart heavy with the weight of what they were about to do. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "If we fail." Grayson met her gaze, his expression unwavering. "If we fail, at least we tried. And if we succeed, maybe we can save lives." Zara nodded, her resolve hardening. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. They would send the message, and they would face whatever consequences came their way. Together, with one final glance at each other, they activated the communication system and transmitted the message. Now, all they could do was wait. The hours that followed were agonizing. Zara and Grayson remained in the dim-lit room, their nerves frayed as they awaited a response. Every moment felt like an eternity, the weight of their actions pressing down on them. They had risked everything, betrayed their own people in the hope of preventing a catastrophe. But would anyone listen? Finally, a message came through. The screen flickered, and a symbol of the Zelran High Command appeared, followed by a terse, emotionless voice. Your message has been received. Further communication will follow. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. It wasn't much, but it was something. They had been heard. Grayson exhaled slowly, a hint of relief in his eyes. Now we wait. And as they sat together in the quiet, Zara felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, she believed that there was hope. That maybe, just maybe, the war could end, and that they could find a future in the ashes of the past.